The magenta sun cast long shadows across Rix's hydroponic garden as he tenderly adjusted the nutrient flow to his prize-winning crystal melons. Life on agricultural colony P789 was peaceful, predictable, and most importantly, completely devoid of anything remotely resembling an adventure. "Perfect!" he chittered to himself, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction as he recorded the day's growth measurements. Another successful harvest cycle without a single near-death experience. His communicator buzzed. Again. For the 47th time that morning. He ignored it just as he had ignored the previous 46 notifications. The Empire could wait, his melons needed him. The crystal melons sparkled in the dying light, their faceted surfaces refracting tiny rainbows across his exoskeleton. Nothing like the sweat-inducing horrors of that Australian vacation 3 years ago. His therapist said he was making excellent progress, though he still couldn't look at a coffee cup without flinching one. The communicator's buzzing grew more insistent, developing an almost angry undertone. Zex adjusted his farming apron and continued pretending he couldn't hear it. A shadow fell across his garden. A very large, distinctly shuttle-shaped shadow. "Oh! Void, take it," he muttered, watching his prized melons crack under the heat of the shuttle's landing thrusters. Not again. The shuttle's door hissed open with unnecessary dramatic flair. Commander K-Thax emerged, all 4 arms crossed in what Rix recognized as the universal gesture for "you're in deep trouble, soldier." "Shadow strike, Commander Rix." K-Thax's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Or should I say, Farmer Terry? I was just about to check my messages." Rix lied, trying to shield what remained of his crystal melon patch. "Been terribly busy. Very important agricultural duties." 47 ignored communications. K-Thax's upper right arm twitched. "Including one marked urgent, fate of Empire at stakes, and another labeled your mother wants to know why you haven't called." Rix's antennae drooped. The melons needed precise attention during their crystallization phase. "The High Command requires your unique expertise." K-Thax managed to make unique sound like a terminal disease. "We have a situation on Earth." The word Earth sent Rix's nervous system into overdrive and several scales fell off. His secondary heart started palpitating, and his chromatophores flickered in distress patterns that spelled out an O in 17 different languages. "Absolutely not." He backed away, clutching a broken crystal melon like a shield. "I'm retired. Completely retired. Look, I have a garden. And a collection of exotic fertilizers. It's about their young. A simple mission this time." Rix paused. "Their offspring? We need someone to infiltrate a human educational facility. Someone with experience in human behaviors. Someone who has survived their recreational activities. But surely there are others. You're the only operative who's ever returned from a human vacation with all limbs intact, albeit with several interesting new phobias. The coffee wasn't my fault, and those drop bears are real. I know they're real." K-Thax's mandibles twitched in what might have been sympathy. "I repeat, the mission is simple. Infiltrate. Observe their young. Report back. No hiking, no spicy food, no bungee jumping. Their young," Rix repeated slowly, remembering the docile drachnid hatchlings he'd helped raise before his military career. His eyes darted around like he wanted to bolt. K-Thax's antennae curled in amusement. "So you'll do it?" Rix looked at his ruined garden, then at the setting sun. His sense of duty warred with his hard-earned survival instincts. "I suppose, for the Empire." "Excellent! Your biomodification begins tomorrow. We've made some upgrades since last time. The sweating issue should be mostly resolved." As K-Thax turned to leave, he added casually, "Oh, and you'll be handling something called a kindergarten class." Later that night, as Rix packed his emergency beacon, now upgraded with triple redundancy, he wondered why the word kindergarten made his commander's mandibles twitch so violently. After all, he'd survived Australian wildlife. His last thought, as he locked up his greenhouse, was that at least this time, he wouldn't have to drink any coffee. The biomodification chamber hummed ominously as Grix endured his second transformation into human form. 3 years of peaceful farming hadn't prepared him for this moment. "We've made significant improvements," Chief Medical Officer Via Lax announced, her tentacles dancing over holographic controls. "The sweating issue should be mostly resolved, and we've added a new feature: your skin won't change colors when stressed." Mostly resolved? Rix's mandibles clicked nervously. "And the coffee resistance has been upgraded to maximum capacity," she added, ignoring his question. "Though I still wouldn't recommend testing it." The transformation process felt like being turned inside out while solving complex mathematical equations in zero gravity. When it was complete, Grix examined his reflection tall, lean, with what humans would consider an approachable face. Perfect for a substitute teacher. "Remember," Commander Thax briefed him, "you're Mr. Terry from Canada. We've prepared extensive documentation about your teaching credentials. Surely watching young humans can't be worse than—" "Don't say it," Thax interrupted. "Every time someone mentions Australia, the medical bay's PTSD sensors overload." Somewhere an alarm sounded. Happy Valley Elementary School loomed before him like a fortress. Tiny humans swarmed the entrance, their high-pitched vocalizations piercing the morning air. Their energy signatures were off the charts. "Mr. Terry?" Principal Johnson extended her hand. "Welcome to Happy Valley. Don't worry about the scorch marks on the playground equipment. The fire department says they're mostly cosmetic." Rix's biosuit registered a spike in anxiety. "Scorch marks?" "Oh, yes. Little Timmy discovered chemistry last week. Such an enthusiastic learner. We've since implemented a strict no unauthorized explosions policy." The tour of the school revealed what Grix could only describe as organized chaos. Tiny humans ricocheted off walls with impossible energy levels. Art projects that defied the laws of physics adorned the halls. And was that a hamster giving him a suspicious look? "This will be your classroom," Principal Johnson gestured to room 23. Mrs. Henderson had a family emergency, something about her sister's pet iguana achieving sentience. "The usual substitute is out with a medical emergency. The doctors say she'll stop speaking in rhymes any day now." Inside the classroom, evidence of recent chaos was everywhere. Glitter, the most persistent form of human biological warfare, sparkled ominously on every surface. Crayon drawings depicted scenes that would make military strategists weep. "One last thing," Principal Johnson added cheerfully. "We've had to ban sugar in the classroom after the great cupcake incident of last Tuesday. We're still finding frosting in the air vents." As she left, Grix noticed a crude drawing on the wall labeled "My Family Fighting Dragons." The dragons were losing. His internal communicator buzzed status report. "Preparing for first contact with human offspring," he replied. "Request permission to upgrade biosuit's armor rating." The first tiny humans began filtering into the classroom. Their energy signatures made ghost peppers look tame. "Are you our new teacher?" A small female with pigtails asked. "Mrs. Henderson let us keep Gerald." "Gerald?" A class tarantula waved from its terrarium. Grix's biosuit began sweating despite the upgrades. It was going to be a long day. "Don't worry," a boy with missing front teeth grinned. "We only lost 2 substitute teachers this year." His emergency beacon suddenly felt very, very light in his pocket. The morning bell rang. Somewhere in the universe, his crystal melons were probably wilting in sympathy. Rix's biosuit hiccuped. This was definitely worse than Australia. Mr. Terry stood before his classroom of 25 kindergartners who stared at him with unnervingly calculating eyes. His biosuit was already beginning to malfunction under their intense scrutiny. "Good morning. Tiny, huh? Children," he managed, trying to sound cheerful rather than terrified. "Your regular teacher had an emergency, so I'll be—" "Why do you sweat so much?" A small girl with pigtails interrupted, her hand still raised even as she asked the question. "And why does your face glitch sometimes?" added a boy missing his front teeth. "I have a medical condition," Grix replied, using his standard excuse. "It's very common in Canada." "My mom's from Canada," another child piped up. "She never glitches." Before Grix could formulate a response, the classroom door burst open. Mrs. Henderson's assistant rushed in, looking frantic. "Mr. Terry! Emergency staff meeting, just 5 minutes. The children are having their morning snack. Everything's laid out. They're only allowed the sugar-free options in the blue containers." She disappeared as quickly as she'd arrived, leaving Grix alone with 25 pairs of eyes that suddenly gleamed with disturbing intelligence. "Snack time!" the children chorused with suspicious enthusiasm. Grix approached the snack table, checking the blue containers. His relief at finding everything properly organized lasted exactly 30 seconds, the time it took him to realize the children had somehow orchestrated a complex snack-switching operation while his back was turned. "These fruit snacks taste funny," he muttered, examining one. His biosuit's chemical analyzer kicked in too late. "Wait, this isn't sugar-free. SUGARRUSH. Screamed a tiny boy who had already consumed an impossible amount of contraband candy. The classroom erupted into chaos. Children bounced off walls with physics-defying energy levels. His combat training hadn't prepared him for this. Even the drop bears seemed preferable. "Mr. Terry," a small girl tugged his sleeve. "Why do you have antennae?" "I don't have." He reached up in horror, feeling his biosuit glitching from stress. He quickly smoothed his hair over the betraying appendages. "Those are just fashion accessories. Very popular in Canada." "Then why did they just move?" "The air conditioning." A boy performing acrobatics off his desk called out. "Are you an alien, Mr. Terry?" "Preposterous," Grix's voice modulator squeaked. "I'm a completely normal human educator who enjoys normal human activities like consuming dihydrogen monoxide and performing photosynthesis. Eating vegetables? Photosynthesis is what plants do," a particularly scholarly-looking child corrected. "We learned that yesterday." His biosuit was now working overtime to maintain his human appearance as the sugar-charged children circled him like tiny predators. One of them had started taking notes. "Your eyes went sideways," observed another child, now standing impossibly close. "Like a lizard." "And you're sweating rainbow colors," added his note-taking colleague. That's just the light reflecting off my completely normal human perspiration." The classroom hamster, Gerald, watched from his cage with what Grix swore was knowing suspicion. Even the class tarantula seemed to be judging him. "If you're really human," challenged a girl who had somehow acquired war paint made from glitter, "why does your hand have 6 fingers sometimes?" Grix looked down in horror to see his biosuit glitching between human and drachnid form. The children had formed a circle around him, their sugar-enhanced energy making them move with terrifying speed and coordination. "I can explain," he began, just as his antennae popped out again. ALIENTEACHER. They cheered in unison, far too delighted by this revelation. "Can you teach us alien math? Do you have a spaceship? Can we see your real face? Are there alien kindergartens?" The questions came rapid fire as his biosuit continued its spectacular malfunction. Gerald the hamster turned his wheel with smug satisfaction, as if he'd known all along. "This is a level 7 violation of infiltration protocols," Grix muttered to himself, watching as his carefully constructed cover story crumbled before the terrifyingly perceptive minds of sugar-enhanced human children. "Level 7 what?" asked the note-taking child, who had somehow acquired a voice recorder. Just then, the classroom door opened. The assistant poked her head in, took one look at the chaos, including Grix's now partially visible scales, and sighed. "First time with the morning sugar rush, huh? Don't worry, they'll crash in about an hour. Oh, and your antennae are showing again." She closed the door, leaving Grix to wonder if perhaps the entire human species was in on the secret, and just enjoyed watching him suffer. "Can we learn alien languages now?" asked the girl with pigtails, bouncing literally off the walls. "Now let's make friendship bracelets," Grix announced with forced enthusiasm, hoping this activity would be less chaotic than the morning's sugar-fueled pandemonium. The children's eyes lit up with an intensity that made his biosuit's threat detection systems activate. He'd learned that look meant trouble. "Can we use the sparkly beads?" piped up Sarah Jane, the same girl who'd earlier presented a detailed theory about his fashion accessories being alien antennae. "Of course!" Just remember to, before he could finish his safety briefing, 25 tiny humans descended upon the craft supplies like piranha attacking their prey. "Mr. Terry," Tommy called out, already somehow tangled in 12 feet of craft string. "I made a quantum entanglement." "That's not how Quantum Tzex caught himself." "I mean, very creative, Tommy. Let's untangle you before you create a temporal paradox, before recess." His biosuit hiccuped, causing his right hand to briefly display 6 fingers. The note-taking child from earlier immediately added this to her growing evidence notebook. "Mr. Terry," she asked innocently, "why does your hand keep doing that?" "Carpal tunnel," he squeaked. Very common among Canadian teachers. "We spend too much time, wrestling moose." The class hamster, Gerald, gave him what could only be described as an eye roll. Paint appeared next, though Tzex couldn't recall authorizing its distribution. The children wielded their brushes like tiny Jackson Pollocks on a sugar rush. "Look, Mr. Terry," exclaimed Billy, holding up what appeared to be an anatomically accurate diagram of a spaceship. "I drew your house." "That's not what a lovely drawing of a completely normal human house," Grix stammered, his chromatophores flickering in panic. "Why's it got an anti-gravity generator?" asked Emily, peering at the drawing. "And a flux capacitor?" added the ever-observant note-taker. "Those are Canadian architectural features for the snow." "Yes, snow protection technology." His biosuit chose that moment to malfunction spectacularly, causing his hair to briefly stand up like antenna. The children cheered. "Do the color change thing again?" demanded Jessica, brandishing her paintbrush like a weapon. "I don't," "That's not," Tzex spluttered. But his suit betrayed him, cycling through several non-human colors. "COOL," the class chorused. Gerald the hamster seemed to be smirking. Mr. Terry, Tommy had somehow managed to create an even more complex string theory. "Why does your voice sound like bells when you're surprised? And why do you have an extra knee sometimes?" added Sarah Jane. "And how come you keep calling our snacks fuel packets?" Emily chimed in. The classroom door opened, offering brief hope of rescue. Instead, Principal Johnson poked her head in, took one look at the chaos, and smiled. "Having fun with arts and crafts?" "Oh, Mr. Terry, your skin is doing that rainbow thing again." "My cousin has the same condition, must be something in the Canadian water." She left before Grix could respond, leaving him to face his increasingly suspicious students. "Time for cleanup," he announced desperately, hoping to distract from his latest biosuit malfunction. But first, the note-taker raised her hand. "Can you explain why you tried to eat the clay earlier?" "I thought it was a protein supplement. I was testing it for safety." The class hamster actually facepalmed. As the children began their cleanup routine, which somehow created more chaos than the actual activity, Grix sent another message to command: "Request immediate curriculum update." Earth children possess disturbing levels of observational skills and pattern recognition. Suspect possible psychic abilities. Also, require new biosuit, current model apparently not childproof. The hamster watched him with knowing eyes as he helped untangle Tommy from his string theory gone wrong. Somewhere in the universe, his peaceful farming colony was probably missing him. At least they hadn't discovered his emergency beacon yet. Grix stood at the edge of the playground, his biosuit finally stabilized after the morning's arts and crafts chaos. The relative calm lasted exactly 37 seconds. RECESSTIME, 25 tiny voices screamed in unison as they burst through the doors like a swarm of locusts high on sugar-free juice boxes that were definitely not sugar-free tree. "Remember," called out Mrs. Henderson's assistant before disappearing again, "just make sure nobody eats the wood chips or trades their lunch for rocks again." The playground, which had seemed peaceful moments ago, transformed into what Descrix could only describe as a miniature gladiatorial arena. Children swung from impossible heights, scaled walls like gravity was optional, and appeared to teleport between play structures. "Mr. Terry," Sarah Jane called from upside down on the monkey bars. "Watch this!" His biosuit began sweating before she even started her move, a triple flip that would have earned respect from his combat instructors. That's not physically possible," he muttered, checking his sensors for anti-gravity anomalies. "I can do better." Tommy launched himself from the top of the slide, performing what appeared to be advanced aerial acrobatics. "CONTAINME and TBRESCH. Zexrix yelped before catching himself. "I mean, please be careful." The note-taking child appeared beside him, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Terry, why do you keep military terminology when you're stressed?" "I watch a lot of science fiction movies. In Canada, where we all talk like this." Normally, Gerald the hamster, visible through the classroom window, appeared to be taking notes of his own. A high-pitched scream drew his attention to the sandbox, where an intense negotiation over a plastic shovel had devolved into what the children called sharing time, but looked suspiciously like advanced tactical warfare. "They're playing coyotes," warned Billy, running past at speeds that shouldn't be possible for such small legs. "Biological warfare?" Zexgrix squeaked, his biosuit beginning to malfunction again. "Is that authorized for this age group?" "Tag! You've got coyotes!" Jessica touched his arm and ran away giggling. His biosuit went into full decontamination mode, causing him to sparkle briefly in the sunlight. "Oh!" the children chorused. "Do the sparkly thing again?" "That's just Canadian sunscreen reaction," he stammered, trying to control his malfunctioning epidermis. "Very common in maple syrup country." The playground had developed distinct territorial zones, the Slide Kingdom, ruled by a 5-year-old queen who demanded tribute in the form of juice boxes, the Monkey Bar Militia, performing increasingly impossible acrobatic feats, and the Sandbox Syndicate conducting complex negotiations, involving plastic dinosaurs as currency. "Mr. Terry," Emily tugged his sleeve, "can you settle a debate? Jimmy says aliens aren't real, but I saw you change colors during art class. That's just... I have a very rare condition called human normalness syndrome." The note-taking child's pencil scratched faster. His biosuit chose that moment to hiccup spectacularly, producing a rainbow sweat pattern that would have made a chameleon jealous. COOL. The children abandoned their territories to watch the light show. "Is this part of your Canadian condition too?" asked the ever-observant note-taker. "Yes. We call it Aurora Borealis Syndrome. Very common in igloo season." Gerald the hamster had somehow acquired tiny sunglasses and appeared to be judging him through the window. As recess wound down, Tezix Rix's mission report consisted of one line. Human offspring appear to have mastered both anti-gravity and complex socio-political structures by age 5. Recommend immediate revision of species threat assessment. The children lined up to return to class, covered in sand, victory, and what he hoped wasn't actually war paint. Best recess ever. They cheered. "Mr. Terry, will you do the color-changing thing again tomorrow?" His biosuit, finally regaining stability, produced one last rainbow sweat drop in response.